Today, we're going to get started with sign in with Apple, the button. Oh yeah, baby. What's going on, everybody? It's your boy, Kilo Loco. And today we're going to get started with sign in with Apple. I'm going to show you guys how to implement it and make it so that you can actually get back the user's name and their email using this brand new sign in feature, especially since it's going to be mandatory in the future. So let's go ahead and get started. And we're going to go ahead and open up our project. Now, this is just your regular UIKit project. We're doing this in UIKit. We're not doing it in Swift UI. So make sure that you don't hit the Swift UI box. And as you can see, we have a very basic setup. This is going to be our sign in area, and this is going to be our details area, our main view controller after you sign in or whatever. So nothing too crazy going on right here. And then as you can see, we have a user model right here, and it just has like the ID, the first name, last name, and email. We're going to grab all that stuff out of the credentials that Apple provides for us. And then you'll also notice that down here we have the debug description, which is part of the custom debug string convertible, which allows us to print out a user object or pass in a user object as a string, and then it formats it like that, which is pretty cool. So that's pretty much all we have so far. We also have the main view controller, and all this is doing is just taking in the user, and then it's setting the details label, which is just that one label, to the user's debug description. That's it. Nothing crazy. Oh, one last thing. And we have a segue. That's it. That's all. All right, so to get started, what you actually have to do is you have to start up here at your project's main file, and you have to go over to signing and capabilities. What we got to do is we have to hit this little plus button up here at the top. And and before you hit that plus button, if you have anything red right here, make sure you just hit, fix it or whatever. Let Xcode deal with it. If it stays red, that means that you haven't updated your developer portal. Just make sure that you sign into developer.apple.com, and you'll probably see you need to read terms and conditions and agree to whatever. So just keep that in mind. Anyways, we're going to hit the little plus button. We're going to type in sign. It's going to bring up sign in with Apple. We're going to tap on it, double tap on it. It's going to do all the good stuff, and it's going to work. All right. From here, what we actually need to do is we need to make sure that this did update our developer portal. So as I said, let's go ahead and open up our developer portal. That's by going to developer.apple.com. And you just go ahead and sign in. From here, we're going to go over to certificates, IDs, and profiles. We're going to click on that bad boy. We're going to go over here to identifiers. And then what you want to do is you want to search for your bundle ID. So if you don't know where your bundle ID is, it's back over here at the top. Make sure that this is selected, and you go to the general tab, and we're just going to essentially search for UIKit. So we want to make sure that our bundle ID is in there. So I should actually have two because I did this already, but I'm looking for Siwa. So I have this proto one, but I'm looking for the exact one. So as you can see, we have Siwa UIKit. This is the exact one that we want. Whatever your project is called, it's going to be that whatever your domain name is whatever your project name is. If it's not in here for whatever reason, you go up here to the plus, hit identifiers, you go ahead and hit app IDs, hit continue, you give it a name that you want, you pass in the bundle ID to your project. Once again, go back to the general tab, and then you scroll all the way down and make sure that you hit the sign in with Apple. You can go ahead and edit that, and this is where you would choose whether this is your primary app or if this is part of a different app. Just go ahead and hit this one. That's probably what it is. Enable as a primary ID. You save it, and then you go to continue, and then it does exactly what I was showing you before. You essentially get that ID in that list. So it will create your ID in this list over here in the identifiers. So that's all you have to do. You just have to make sure that the back end of the developer portal is all set up. Once you do that, what we're going to do is now we're going to actually start writing some code. So go ahead, head over to your login VC, your sign in VC, whatever you want to call it. This is just my regular view controller, the first page that they're going to see where we're actually going to display the button. Go to that page. All right, so go to the view controller. And the first thing that we want to do is we actually have to set this up programmatically. Unfortunately, there's no way to do it in storyboards. I tried a couple of different methods. I try to hack it a little bit. You can't do it in storyboards. You have to do it programmatically. Now, to the extent of how much you do programmatically and how much you can actually do in storyboards, that's up to you. I'm going to just show it the entire programmatic way. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create a function called setupView. And what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we're calling the setup view inside of our viewDidLoad, because we want to make sure that we're essentially going to be calling this block of code, right? And what we're going to do in here is we're going to actually create the actual button. So let's go ahead and create that button. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an Apple button, and it's actually called ASAuthorizationAppleIDButton. And as you can see, I'm not getting like any syntax highlighting, and I'm getting this error. That's because we have to import authentication services. So make sure that you have authentication services imported, or else this won't work. So as you can see, we're getting the syntax highlighting, and what we want to do is we want to make sure that our so we're pretty much just saying that it's using auto layout but programmatically. All right, that's all you really need to know. So from here, what we need to do is we actually need to add the constraints to the button. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Now, as you can see, we have to make sure that we add the button to our view. So we're adding it as a subview. So view.add_subview. We're going to add our button to the subview, and then we need to lay out our constraints for the button. So we want to make sure that we give it a Y position. Where is it in the screen? I'm just going to put it right there in the center. So we're going to center it with the view center, and then we just want to stretch it from left to right. You know how I like to stretch it out. And we're just going to say leading is going to be 30 from the left, and then trailing is going to be 30 from the right. And then since this button actually has an intrinsic size, which means that it comes with its own size, you don't need to specify a height constraint. All right. So now if we go ahead and run this, we should actually see the button popping up in our UI. All right, and as you can see, sign in with Apple, baby. Oh yeah, your boy knows what he's doing. I guess so then. All right, so next what we need to do is we need to actually add the functionality, because if you go and take a look at that button, it don't be doing nothing though. So let's go ahead and add in some functionality for that button. We're just going to create a function that's going to handle when we tap on this button. So let's go ahead and do that. Did tap Apple button, and we can go ahead and start writing in some of the functionality. So this is the part where like the actual authorization services logic comes into play. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to create what's called a provider, and that's essentially going to give us the ability to create a request and then actually send that request. So let's do that right now. So we have our provider, and then we have a request from our provider is doing create request. And then our request has a property on it that says what scopes we want to pull in. So by default, you're going to be getting back an Apple ID, right? Now, depending on what your app actually needs, whether it needs a full name or an email, or both, then this is when you would add this in here. So you would add it in here, depending on what your app needs, a full name or an email or both. If you need both, then you do it like this. If you just need one, you do it like that. And as you can see, if we go ahead and command click into here, this is actually going to be it's called a scope. This is a struct. And as you can see, since it's a struct, what they're doing is they're just creating static instances of that scope, which means that Apple will probably extend this a little bit further in the future, maybe even give us access to the image in the future, but who knows. For now, it's just full name and email. All right, from here, what we actually need to do is create what's called a authorization controller. All right, so we have our authorization controller, and the authorization controller is actually going to be taking in the request that we created up here with our provider, and it's going to be processing that. So this is going to be the actual thing that pops up on the screen. That's what the controller is. Now, as you can see, we're currently getting some errors because we have two delegates essentially. We have the actual delegate, which we're setting equal to self, which is this view controller isn't currently conforming to this delegate. And then we have another one called presentation context provider. We're going to get to that in a bit. But what you also need to notice is that we're performing requests on our controller. So we're saying, all right, you have all the information that you need to go out there and do your thing, bring up the sheet. Let's get this Apple sign-in started. All right, so before we move any further and before we actually start conforming to these delegates, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over here to our setup view, and I'm going to make sure that I add a target for our button to make sure that, when we tap on the button, it's actually going to call this function right here. So let's go ahead and add that in real quick. So we have AppleButton.addTarget. And we're going to say self, and the selector is going to be this did tap Apple button down here, and we're triggering it based off of a touch up inside. So just your standard touch. Now let's go ahead and take care of this error down here where we're not conforming to each of these delegates. So we're going to just go to the bottom since we're doing all of this in the view controller. If you guys want me to go back and kind of refactor this and show you guys a little bit more of best practices, 250 thumbs up. I'll go back and refactor all this and we'll do best practices so it's nice and clean. 250 likes. Let's get it. All right, so what we're going to do is we're just going to make sure that our view controller is conforming to the two delegates that it needs to. So let's do that now. And as you can see, we're doing an extension on our view controller. Now the first one, which is the actual delegate right here, the controller.delegate is going to be an ASAuthorizationController delegate. Now this is going to be essentially what happens whether the controller that pops up, the little sheet that's going to pop up, whether it fails or if it's successful. And that's where we're going to be running our logic. So as you can see right here, there's two methods in here. We had the did complete with authorization. This is essentially what's going to give us back the information on the user. Or we have one that's essentially just throwing an error saying, hey, something broke, you need to handle that. And then down here in this other delegate, what we have is this ASAuthorizationController presentation context providing. Yeah, I don't know, like delegate names, right? So this one is actually saying what window are we presenting in. So I think this is primarily because we're going to be dealing with more like multiple windows since iPad OS has come out. So it's asking which window we're working with. And all you really need to do is just specify this current views window. So if we just go ahead and say return view.window, that's going to solve this error. It's going to grab the window for this current view and it's going to know, hey, we need to present it in this window. Now for the error, it's going to be pretty much the same thing. We're just going to print out the error, something bad happened, and then just throw an error. I'm not going to do the error handling once again. If you guys want more best practices, 250 thumbs up, let's do it. I'll get it to you. But this is really where the main magic happens, right here in this delegate method right here. Did complete with authorization. So when you start doing autocomplete, just type in did complete, and it's probably going to be the first one that starts off with this authorization controller. And this is where all the magic happens. So from here, what we want to do is we actually want to run a switch statement because authorization has a couple of different possibilities. If you go ahead and jump into this definition, you'll actually see that you could either be a provider or a credential. So we want to switch based off of whichever one of those whatever one of those is coming back. So let's go ahead and do that. And as you can see, we're just grabbing the authorization that's being passed into us, and we're going to say we're going to switch based off of the credential. And if the credentials, and we're just going to call it credentials, if this is an ASAuthorizationAppleID Apple ID credential, which is essentially the Apple's user object. If it's one of those, then go ahead and run this block of code, which we currently have a break. And the other option would be to, if we were going to be handling automatic login, I'm going to do that in a separate video, the auto login. So we're not going to get to that today. So we're just going to leave this as default as break. We're just going to get started with just signing in. So what we have is this credentials, and this credentials, when we cast it as this ASAuthorizationAppleID credential, this type of object actually has all the user information that we want. So what we're going to do is, instead of handling all that stuff right here, let's go back over to our user object and just add an initializer that's going to handle that for us. So we can just say that we want to initialize with some credentials. So we're going to take in the credentials, and we're going to take in an ASAuthorizationAppleID credential, the same type of object that we saw back over here, like right there. And then we also want to make sure that we're importing the authorization services, right? And then, as you can see, credentials has a couple of different properties on it. So this type of object has a user, and this is actually the ID. It's not like a real user object, how we have it here, where it has like an ID, first name, last name. This is just the ID. So the user is just the ID. It's the user ID. And then credentials also has a property called full name, and this is actually a special type of object that's it's called a person name components. So person name components comes with a given name and a family name, and we're just going to pass those in to the English translation, which is a first name is the given name and the last name is the family name, and those are optional. All of these are going to be optional essentially, because you don't know at this point essentially what you were asking for back over here. So since you don't know if you're actually requesting what type of scopes you're requesting, whether it's full name or email or either or none of them, since you don't know that, these are actually going to come back as optional, because the only thing that's really guaranteed to come back is just the user ID, which is the .user property. So that's why all of these are optional. And then credentials obviously has a .email property, and this is just a string, so you could just pass that right on in there. All right, so now that we have this user object that can be initialized with some credentials, what we're going to do is we're going to go back over here to our switch statement. We're just going to go ahead and create that user object, and we're going to segue into the main app and show our users information. So let's go ahead and do that right now, and that's going to be creating the user like so, and performing a segue like so. So now we shouldn't be getting any errors, and if we go ahead and tap on this and we run it, everything should work. All right, so what we have to do is we have to sign in with Apple, and as you can see, it's actually pulling up the sheet as expected. You can see the app's icon, and it's actually telling you what is what it's trying to do and what the app is actually trying to do. So it's trying to sign you into this specific app, and it's asking you to create an account. Now, the cool thing about this is that you can actually change your name from right here to whatever you want. Like I could change it to Kilo. Oh, and also it's a little bit buggy. So the keyboard doesn't always work. Like your actual keyboard doesn't actually work. You have to you have to type it in on the like the iOS keyboard. I don't know. It's a little bit buggy. I'm sure that they'll fix it. Anyways, you can change your first name, you can change your last name, and you can go forward with whatever information you want. Now, this is the cool part where you do you could either share your real email, or well, the user, I guess. The user can either choose to share their real email, which is the one that's automatically associated with their Apple account. So this is my old crap one. And then these are my other alias ones, I guess. And, we can choose from any of these, which is really cool. Or if I really want it, I can just hide my email and just say that it's garbage. So these are the options that are given to the user, which is pretty cool. So they can control their privacy depending on what they want to do. Now, after they choose whatever their email is and make sure that their name is filled in, you can just continue with password. And once again, this is the part that you need to make sure that you're manually typing it in with the simulator if you're on the simulator. All right, so once you type in your password, you can just go ahead and press continue. Now, based off of everything that we've done, it should go to the next screen, but apparently I broke something, so let's go ahead and fix that. All right, so as you can see, I forgot to call the segue, so let's go ahead and do that all over again. I'm just gonna go back over to the main storyboard, and if you downloaded the project in the description, you're gonna have to do this too. You're gonna have to call it segue, so just go ahead and change this to segue, and you should be good. All right, it's launching back up and I'm just going to do the sign in. I'm going to choose to hide my email. I'm going to go forward with the name Kyle Lee. That's perfectly fine with me. I'm going to type in my password. All right, and then once I type in my password, I hit continue. It calls the API, it comes back, and then this information should print out right here. But once again, I made another mistake. So as you can see, this is the actual ID that's coming back, but this is supposed to be lines is set to 0. So as you can see, it worked with the hidden one, and I'll just go ahead and do it again with the hidden one. Let's do it with the hidden one. All right, so I type in my password and then it moves forward, and then now it's actually formatting it properly. So as you can see, this is the ID. It's separate. It looks kind of like a JOT token if you guys are familiar with JOT tokens. So it's like a short like string. Well, it is a string. It's a couple of digits, and then it's like this long token, and then another couple of digits, and then you have the first name, which is once again that's the given name, last name, that's the family name, and then email. As you can see, this is some garbage that was created by Apple, but remember, if you watch the keynote, that the user will still be able to get information or emails through this this garbage email address, because it is technically linked to their Apple ID, but they can turn it off or unsubscribe from those junk emails at any point. So it's really cool for the user, and it's you know, it just gives them the ability to do that privacy. And then like one last thing that you might notice is that slides are in here now. Like this is your default transition. So in case you didn't hear me talk about that with Eman on Swiftcraft, go back and listen to that. But yeah, this is the default transition now, so don't worry about this. This is just default now. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So I hope you guys learned something new. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Like I said before, if you guys want to see me go back and kind of refactor this, do it in a better best practices type of way, then 250 thumbs up is what we're looking for. And then I'm also going to come back and revisit this topic on how to do auto login with the sign in with Apple. So how to save the user's credentials and then bring them back down, and then just determine on which screen they're supposed to go to. And then I'm also going to be covering this topic, the same 2 videos with Swift UI. So depending on how difficult it is with Swift UI, it may be 1 or 2 videos, but we're going to cover it in Swift UI too. But thanks again for stopping by. Really appreciate that. Now go out there and keep coding passionately.